So I needed to start recording. I forgot to start recording. Okay. So I was saying, when you look at computer memory, I gave you this diagram last time. And we said that this is the central processing unit. Inside it, we are going to have the control unit and the ALU, arithmetic and logic unit. Then here we are going to have the main memory. And this will be the input devices. And this will be the output devices. And the flow of information will be from input to the CPU, and then from the CPU to the output device, or from the CPU to the backing storage, or from the backing storage to CPU. And that's the CPU. Sorry, backing storage. Now, this main memory consists of two parts. The first part is random access memory. The second part is read-only memory. And this is also referred to as ROM. Now, this is the part I'm saying the software that is used to start up a computer is stored in a chip called read-only memory chip. And this software is what is referred to as basic. This software is referred to as basic input and output system, or BIOS. Okay. So now the thing is, this software, which is used to start up the computer, the BIOS, is stored in a memory chip which needs power when you are not connected to electricity. And that's where this battery comes in. So this battery is used to power the memory where BIOS is stored. And that chip is referred to as CMOS, complementary metal oxide diode system. Complementary metal oxide semiconductor diodes, CMOS. So you'll find that you hear this term being used, CMOS, that's complementary metal oxide semiconductor diodes. Okay, so this type of technology requires a low voltage to power them to ensure that their contents are not lost. And this is what you're going to, that's where this battery, which is found here, is going to be used. So if you happen to troubleshoot a computer where it's losing time every time they disconnect, when they switch it on, you find the date is wrong, the time is wrong, and some settings are not okay, then the first place to check is most likely this battery is flat and need to be replaced. Because when it is flat, then those settings which are stored are going to be lost. So these are the major components of a motherboard in a nutshell. Of course, there are these other electronic components, capacitors. Again, just a quick point here. These capacitors are one area where a lot of motherboards gets damaged. When you look at a motherboard, one way you can tell that it is in good condition or it has some issues is the state of these capacitors. The capacitors are supposed to be flat on the surface, but when they are exposed to irregular voltage, maybe because of power surge or something went wrong with the power supply, they are going to begin to swell. So the top part are going to be curved. Immediately you know that, then you should identify that that's a problem. And either you need to replace these capacitors or replace the motherboard altogether. Okay, any questions before I move on to look at a few things about motherboard layout? Okay,
No?
now, yes.
Oh, I'm just behind on Firewire because I just found you just in the middle of the
Okay,
session.
okay. I'll come. Firewire is a special type of connection, connector used on computers. I'll look at it in a bit more detail. It looks similar to HDMI, but it's a much older connector. I used I used it a lot when I was doing video editing. Some other video cameras are going to use a FireWire connection because it's a faster, it offers faster connections compared to a number of connectors that we have looked at. It's proprietary. I think it was designed by Apple or one of these companies, but then they allowed other people to use it. But we'll be looking at it in a moment. But these which are listed here are just some of the connectors that you find on a motherboard. On this one, I can't see a FireWire port. It doesn't seem to have one.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Now, the layout of a motherboard. The motherboard, maybe I need to point out, is also referred to as a system board. So it shouldn't confuse you when you find that term being used. But basically, we're talking about the circuit board where electronic circuits have been printed on it, typically using a form of silver. so that the different components can communicate with the processor. There are different layouts, but the most common one is what is called the micro ATX. Now, the layout and the size of a motherboard is referred to as the form factor. And for desktops, these have been standardized. All manufacturers of desktops, they adhere to these standards. For laptops, there is no standard. So it's very difficult to get components which are designed on an HP ProBook and use it on a Lenovo IdeaPad. But for desktops, these motherboards layouts have been standardized. So there is what is called ATX and BTX, micro ATX, and NLX. Okay. We're not going to the details of that, but for the ATX, if you like acronyms, ATX, that's the advanced technology extended form factor. Then the NLX, NLX is used for smaller devices. It's called now. Sorry, I think I should have got something. Oh, that's the new law profile. That's new law profile. Extended form factor. Okay. But both of these are not very common. This one is for very small devices, such as network switches and some other small electronic gadgets. But for desktops, the one that is common used is called micro ATX, like the one that we looked at. This one, this is a micro ATX motherboard. Okay. In terms of input and output interfaces, I've mentioned a number of them. For videos, we have the IEEE 1394. This is the one which is also referred to as FireWire port. So the trade name is FireWire, but the standard is IEEE 1394. Then we have parallel port or Centronics for the odd printer connection, this one. as well as the network interface controller or network interface card. The USB, that is Universal Serial Bus, is this is parallel. It consists of 40, about 40 lines. So the cable for this one used to have a lot of wires because the bits, binary digits, were transmitted in one line at a time. Sorry, in each wire. Okay, it was felt at the time, or the technology that was available, it was faster than sending these binary bits in sequence. But technology changed where they found a way in which these bytes can be transmitted serially or in sequence on a single line at a very high speed. And that's what resulted in what is now called the Universal Serial Bus, or USB. The first standard was version 1.1, which was upgraded to version 2, and now we have USB version 3, and there's also 3.1, which is a minor version of the version 3. Okay. For the desktop USB connections, these are compatible. They look the same, and you can interchange them. Only that, whenever you connect a device and the port, which is of a different USB version, it will default to the lowest speed that can be accessed both by the port and the device connected to it. But for smaller devices like smartphones, the shapes of these ports are different. But for a desktop, these are all referred to as input and output interface. Again, let me just go back. These are the ones which are found at the back of the motherboard. Yeah. Now, I did show you a video card. There's also a sound card. Now, we did see that the motherboard has these expansion slots. These expansion slots are designed to be used to add additional capabilities and functionalities. For example, the sound produced from a typical motherboard is good enough for just listening, like you're playing a song to one or two people who are nearby. But if you want to have a good home theater experience, you might need to get a better sound card. Now, a sound card is an electronic circuit board which converts signals from the CPU into sound. Just like a video card is an electronic circuit which converts signals from the CPU into images which can be seen on the monitor or on a projector. And motherboard, they come with built-in sound cards, built-in video card or graphics card. But for improved quality of sound output, you can have an additional card, a sound card, which you buy on its own and you put it in the extension slot. And this can improve the quality of sound produced by the computer. This is a video card. Like the one I showed you, it has provision to connect to different output devices. But what you also notice is that it has a fan and this, the heat sink. This is for cooling. The idea is underneath it, it will have its own processor, which is referred to as a graphics processing unit, GPU. So what happened is that the process of rendering signals, electronic signals into sound will be done by the processor on a typical laptop or desktop. But that can slow down the computer because it's a tedious and resource consuming process. So if you want improved experience, you get a video card. Now, this is called also a dedicated video card. In other words, it's going to have a dedicated processor that is just there to render sound or video signals for your machine. And they also tend to produce a lot of heat, so they need some form of cooling. That's why they have fans for cooling, or they are going to have heat sink so that they can dissipate heat and cool down as they are working. So when you are talking about a dedicated graphics card, you are talking about an extra card which you buy and insert into the expansion slot to provide superior graphics services on your machine. The one which comes built into the motherboard is called onboard or integrated sound card or integrated video card. So a typical video card can have a dedicated processor, which is sometimes referred to as a graphics processing unit, GPU. It will have its own BIOS, it will have its own memory for processing and storage of images, and it will have heat sink for cooling effects. Any questions? This is the, I don't know if you're able to see, this is my video card. It doesn't have a fan, but it has a heat sink for cooling. Underneath the heat sink, that's where there is a graphic processing unit to provide the cooling. And so this one will provide superior graphics images compared to the one which comes embedded into your motherboard. Okay, the FireWire technology is also almost obsolete now. But this one, like I said, is referred to as, it was standardized by the IEEE organization. I hope we understand this. This is a very common acronym that you'll be coming across in IT, especially if you venture into networking. That IEEE is Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineers. It is the largest organization that sets standards for computer communication. So they set these standards as 1394. This is also referred to as FireWire. And like I said, it's mainly used for video devices, but it can also be used for connecting some external hard drives. And we have the pictures there for the different shapes. Yes, Mr. Leza, you have a question?
I was just adding up to what you are saying over the I wanted to identify these letters. I thought maybe you were asking a question over them.
Oh, okay. So this is the Organization for Electrical and Electronic Engineers, which has been instrumental in setting standards for computer communications. A network interface controller or network interface controller card, or NIC in short, is an expansion card that is used to connect a desktop or a laptop computer to a network. Let me not say expansion. On some motherboards, or most of them, you always have at least one built-in network interface controller for connecting to the network. But if you need to, maybe in some cases you want to connect to more than one network, or for the sake of improving speed, especially if it's a network server, you want to have more than one network connection, you can add additional network interface connection interface cards. And this is the card that is displayed here. So this one differs from the one we have seen in the sense that the one which we saw earlier is built into the motherboard, but this one you will insert it into the expansion slot. You buy it as an expansion card. Please, these speeds, okay, we need to just mention them. The speeds for the network, this type of network, in particular, which I'm referring to, which is in this, is Ethernet. The speeds are 10 megabits, 100 megabits, 1,000 megabits, and 10,000 megabits or gigabits. Okay. So this is a bit odd. It's a bit odd speed which they are restricting there. No. Okay. For special cases, yeah, 160 gigabits per second. Yeah. No, it's fine. Okay. But for a typical network, you'll normally be using either 100 megabits or 1 gigabit. You can also find 10 gigabits, but in most workplaces in Zambia, they don't go beyond that. Okay. But again, it's important to note that these are backward compatible, and they are going to default to the lowest speed that can be used by both the sending and the receiving machines. So there's no, you only notice reduced speed if you are dealing with a lot of network traffic. Okay, a modem. We are still looking at different components that these are all input-output devices. A modem, anyone who can tell us what the word modem means? You've commonly come across this approach of creating acronyms. Modem is modulator, demodulator. They take M or D from modulator and DEM from demodulator, but because D is common, so it's only appearing once as modem. To modulate is to take a digital signal and transmit it using an analog channel. So in the early days of networking, what used to happen is people used to use the telephone cables for internet as well. Now, the telephones which were used at that time were analog, were using analog signals. So the signal from the computer had to be converted into a form that can be transmitted over the telephone cable to the destination. Now that process is what is called modulation. And once this signal has traveled, and before it gets to the receiving computer, another modem is going to convert it back to digital, from analog to digital. I'm sure you've heard of frequency modulation, FM. Talking about radio, whatever, FM. That's frequency modulation. Okay, the modulation is still the same concept. Okay, you're taking the digital signals and converting them into a form of analog signals so that they can be transmitted. Okay, so the device that is used to allow a digital computer transmit data on an analog network is called a modem. These modems are of different types. There are some which are referred to as internal modems. These used to be built into the motherboard of the laptop or desktop, but you could also buy a separate modem with maybe its own power supply, which you just connect as in the diagram. Okay. Now, modems are, the traditional modems are obsolete. Let me not say almost, they're obsolete because the speeds were extremely low. You are talking of 144, 1,440 bytes per second, or 1.4 0.44 megabytes per second, which is a very low speed that we were using at the time. But there are also special type of modems called cable modems. These can transmit data at much higher speeds. But again, the whole setup of using cable modems is not very popular anymore because they have been surpassed by the introduction of technologies such as fiber optic cable networks. So it's not that common that you find these modems being used. Data transmission rates in modems is measured in bytes per second and baud rate. There's a slight difference between baud rate and bytes per second. I don't know if I'll be able to draw this effectively. When you are dealing with modulation, the baud rate means the number of times the signal is changing, the frequency at which the signal is changing. Now, in modulation, what it is that frequency modulation is like this. They get two frequencies This is a different frequency, this is a different, and that's a different, that will be a different frequency. The signal, to convert the digital signal and transmit it on analog, they'll use one frequency to represent ones and another frequency to represent zeros. Now, in some cases, in some modems, they do not only use one form of modulation. They can also use phase modulation. Phase, now we are going to, phase is like this. That's one phase, if this is the starting point. And also if you start like that. So these two are in different phases. So they can also use different phases for representing ones and zeros. The same, using different frequencies and using different phases. Also, it's possible to use what is called amplitude modulation. I'm sure you have on some radio receivers, you see where it says FM, AM. AM, that's amplitude modulation. This is where they take a signal. The amplitude is the distance from the center to the peak. So they'll use one amplitude to represent a 1 and another one to represent a 0. So some modems are able to incorporate all these to transmit more than 1 byte per cycle. And because of that, the baud rate, although the frequency is, the signal is changing maybe the same frequency, at the same frequency, but the output, the amount of information being or the number of bytes being transmitted is going to differ. If the baud rate is, if the signal is just using one form of modulation, then the baud rate is equal to bytes per second. But if it's using different types of modulation, then the baud rate is going to be higher than the other way around. The baud rate is just the number of times the frequency is changing per second. So within that, it can transmit more bytes than one which is just using one form of modulation. That's a difference between those two. I don't know if the explanation is clear.
Yeah, loud and clear. We're following.
Okay. I had mentioned PS2 connectors. These were used on old types of keyboards and mice. They are small and round, and if you go back to, I'm running out of time again. These are the PS2 connectors. You rarely find these in use anymore. One of the challenges that we used to have is they were exactly identical for the keyboard and the mouse. So if you swap them, then the keyboard and the mouse will not work. So you just have to try the other way around. So they started color coding them, using different colors for keyboard and for the mouse. Unfortunately, I'm run out of time. Okay, that's the last part. If you have any questions, please, you can ask on the WhatsApp group. Less than a minute before I'm disconnected. Do you need notes for this?
I think you can just, is it not recorded, this one?
It is recorded.
I think you can just send it for us like you always do.
Okay. All right, I'll stop there.